Thanks very much.
I'll take 5 minutes of your time here. Mentioned our integrated. Let me explain first what integrated means and what it means in relationship to what we're talking about today. And I'll use my own company as an example, but there's a number of companies in Ireland and Britain done the same shape as us. So integrated, by that we mean we generate, in fact we build our own power stations, and we supply customers at the other end. So from finding sites all the way through to customers, we generate the power and bring it all through them. Now, if I take you through each of those businesses and explain the challenge we face around energy, around wind, and what each of those businesses is trying to do to sort of solve that problem. Well, I'll say solve it, find solutions to it. So you take the supply end. Most people here will probably see a supply business, for example, as sort of the bills through the door type organisation. Wouldn't see them, I would say a lot of people in Ireland wouldn't see them as any sort of solution to it. What supply companies have, the only part of this chain has any sort of relationship with customers, with end customers. At the end of the day, end customers are going to be people who pay for all this. Electricity network, electricity investment is going to be paid for fully by customers. So they have a very, very important role in how we find solutions to this. From the level of smart meters, as Toby talked about, right to the other end, for example, David mentioned demand-side units. We're starting a demand-side unit business in the Republic of Ireland. We've lined a number of customers up. They're going to start demand-side operation within the next 2 or 3 months, which is the first step along this road of trying to find a solution to the customer side. If we move on to generation, the business I run, like a lot of businesses in Ireland, has 2 types of generation. It's got thermal plant and it's got wind. I'll talk about the thermal plant first. We have 2 reasonably modern gas-powered generators just outside North Dublin. One's Mitsubishi and one is Siemens. They were both designed largely to be base load plant, like most of the gas plant. We're not going to see base load running in those plants. The future for every gas plant in this Ireland is not going to be base load. It's going to be up and down, turned off and on. And the simple fact is, for a lot of plant and a lot of these power generators, we simply don't know what it's going to be like to have 200 or 300 starts a year. What's that going to do to reliability, for example? We expect our plant to be reliable 97% of the time. All our models are done on that. A lot of the Eurogrid modelling is done on that as well. What happens when those plants start to fall over? That creates its own dynamic in itself. Part of the solution to the intermittency of wind is more responsiveness from those plants. But it's very important to realise those plants were built before the wind policies were largely set up. There's only so much those power plants can do. We can't re-engineer them in any shape or form. Largely the thermal generation fleet we've got now is going to be the thermal generation fleet we're going to have in 5, 10, 15 years. If we move on to wind then. So I think everyone understands the need to reduce the amount of carbon in the economy. Power generation is a large contributor to carbon. The only option that not just Ireland's got, but Europe has got, is around wind. It's the only mature technology there is to deliver the sort of scale we need of carbon reduction. Europe is betting wind and Ireland is betting wind heavily. It's betting wind heavily, as mentioned earlier. Ireland is a windy place. It's an island off the west coast of Europe. It's in the Atlantic. The wind factors are very, very good. In fact, wind factors in Donegal, Mayo, Cork, Kerry, Tyrone, Fermanagh are akin to what Germany would get offshore. So that's the kind of wind resource we've got. The targets we've set are pretty high, 40%. That means in effect that the wind generation in Ireland can cover almost all the demand at times. And that is very difficult to manage for a system. Very, very difficult indeed to manage for a system. So a couple of things are happening. The regulators are trying to work out how do we cope with so much wind in the system, because if there's too much wind that comes on, this is where curtailment comes into place. Pretty much in law, wind has got to run first. It's European law, it's enshrined in the SAM in Ireland, that wind is what's called must run. If wind generates, it's got to jump ahead of all the other generating stations. So somehow they've got to manage the amount of wind comes on the system, the thermal power plant, at the end they've got to manage the cost to customers. So they've come up with these rules about curtailment. Now, I'll be honest with you, they weren't the set of rules. We argued for something very, very different for curtailment, but we've got what we've got. Effectively what that means is if there's too much wind, curtailment's going to kick in. And when I talk about curtailment, at the moment, there is curtailment in the system. It's around about, you see 1, maybe 1.5%, 2% of it. What we're really talking about here is 2020, 7, 8 years on, the amount of wind has expanded greatly. How do we deal with curtailment? So what the regulators have come up with is a plan around curtailment. Effectively, it means if wind farms are curtailed, wind farms get no compensation. That's effectively it. That, of course, causes us a problem, because if we're not getting compensation for curtailment, it's difficult to build wind farms. It's difficult to get them financed. So there's a number of, processes going on to try to solve this problem. For example, our grid's doing a DS3 programme, which is hope it will aid the amount of penetration of wind. There's going to be a heavy reliance upon the interconnectors to the UK, both the Moyle and the East-West interconnector. It's probably worth noting that as we sit today, we have 1,000 megawatts for interconnection built. There's only 250 megawatts that working today. The East-West interconnector from Dublin to Wales isn't operational yet. And the Moyle, I'm sure as most people know, has got its own problems as well. So interconnection is not the solution, but they've assumed that effectively what's going to happen is if there's too much wind in Ireland, it's going to go across to the UK, be exported. In practice, that doesn't happen at the moment. In March, we had an exceptionally windy month. We also had a rare of an exceptionally windy month. We had a spike in fuel prices. So when wind was at highest in Ireland, power was actually flowing across the interconnector from the UK and the Ireland. So it's not the interconnector we don't see as a solution, but it's banked on it. They've assumed important customers' demand side units and all that picks off. At the moment, whilst we're open, as I mentioned earlier, we're open to demand side unit business. It's quite a small, the amount of megawatts in Ireland we see available for that sort of 300 to 400 megawatts, we can convince everyone to do it. So it's not going to be a solution either. By 2020, if we don't find a solution to curtailment, there will be major problems for the wind business in Ireland and the electricity generation sector in general. It's expected, and I talked about 1 to 2%, we expect if a curtailment comes to something like 5% or even up to 10%, we expect wind farms to start to default, because wind farms are financed very, very tightly. And if we start to see reductions of sort of 5 or 10%, you can see them in very, very serious financial problems. The good thing about the people from this audience is, at the moment, there is no solution to this. And I really say that at the moment, 6 or 7 years' time, as an investor, and a substantial investor in this market, we don't yet know how this thing's going to be solved. There's an expectation it will be solved. We don't yet know exactly what that solution is. And that's what creates the opportunity we're talking about today. There is a real opportunity to develop intelligent systems to manage it, to come up with new ways about how a power system works, to come up with new ways of how a customer interacts. Unfortunately, we're doing that in the middle of a very, very deep recession. Electricity demand has dropped in Ireland year after year now for the last 6 or 7 years. I work very closely with customers, and I can tell you now, they are not in any appetite to sort of spend huge amounts of money now for jam tomorrow. They are very, very much day to day. They want to see instant returns for what they get. We're talking about companies in Ireland, north and south, which wouldn't have the capital to invest in payback of 3 or 4 months. And we're as an industry expecting them to sort of put a lot of money into something that's going to pay something in 2020. So the argument with customers has yet to be won, to be absolutely honest with you. I'm completely committed and convinced that if we build a renewable system in Ireland, it is going to be cheaper for customers. Absolutely going to be cheaper. To be honest with you, the argument comes down to this. We have nothing else in Ireland but wind. We don't have any natural resources in any type or form. We have to put our bet on wind. Wind does deliver cost savings in the long run, but that argument is still ongoing with customers, and I wouldn't want anyone to leave this room thinking that the whole body politic accepts what we're talking about today. Right, back on to intelligent systems. There's a real demand for them, there's a real need for them, there's a real opportunity here to move it forward. As I said, the larger companies like us, we will implement stuff for customers, but our real drive is around mature technologies and trying to find things that work in the longer term. The opportunity's out there, and let's hope we can capitalise on it. Thanks very much for your time.